Mom and Dad's story. But I remember some of it very well. This is a true story that took place in the Netherlands, also called Holland, in the very, very northern province of Holland, Friesland. Our little village was called Eis. At that time, we had about 1,500 people living in our town. Our family lived in a house with a butcher shop. My dad was the town's butcher. I'm the eldest in our family of 5 children. The 2 youngest siblings were born after the war. The Nazis invaded our country in World War II in the 1940s. 2 years later, my dad became active in the Dutch underground, also called the resistance fighters. Most of their activities were done in secret at night. They would break into the municipality's office, which had been taken over by the Germans. They had to steal food stamps and money to buy food for the Jews that were hidden in our town. My dad became involved in smuggling the Jews out of the big cities like Amsterdam and The Hague. Sometimes they were put in caskets, but of course they were alive. The slaughterhouse, or the attic above our slaughterhouse, often had enough guns, grenades, and TNT to blow our little village off the map. The Allies would drop the ammunition in the farmer's field, and they would be picked up by the underground guys and were taken to various places in our province. My parents were people with strong principles and convictions. My dad put his convictions into action by hiding about 200 Jews in our village. In 1943, when I was 6 years old, a Jewish family came to live with us. And we called them Uncle Ben and Tilly and the 90-year-old challenged son, Wim. The day before they came, my mother took me aside and she took me in her bedroom. And she said to me, I have to tell you a big secret. And I said to my mother, what is it, secret? Well, she said, tomorrow we're going to have a family, a Jewish family, are going to live with us for I don't know how long. But they will be arriving tomorrow. And she said, there is no way that you can tell this to anybody, not even your best friend, Andy. She said, you can play with your friends in the slaughterhouse, but you cannot take your friends inside our house from now on. So this was quite a change for me. And a few days later, we were playing outdoors with our neighbor kids, and my little brother, who was 4 years old, went up to Anna, and he said, Anna, we have a big secret in our house. I said, what's your secret? Well, he said, we have an uncle and an aunt and another guy living with us upstairs. And immediately I said, well, you know, we have these big dolls upstairs. My mom bought them not too long ago. And sometimes we're allowed to play with them. And Fred calls them Uncle and Aunt. When I told the story to my mom that evening, she said it was an uncle. But she said, that the girl, you keep that up. Life was certainly different when these people were living with us. My dad was very busy with his work in the underground. Our house had to be run in such a way that the neighbors who lived very close to us, there was only kind of an alley in between the homes, had to be run in such a way that our neighbor would have no idea that we had Jewish people living with us. Which meant that their laundry couldn't be hung on the line, on the clothesline, on account of, well, there would be a lot of extra laundry. Uncle Ben was a big man, with big pajamas, big shirts. And you know, the entertainment in those days was watching what the neighbors are doing. So if we would have had their laundry on our clothesline, we would have said, who is living in the Young's place? During the war, you didn't get any visitors. Another thing she had to do and dreaded was the toilet. We didn't have indoor toilets in my place. The Jews had a bucket upstairs, which was used as a toilet. And my mother had to empty the bucket every morning before daylight. After the war, she would often say, oh, that was my worst job, because I would be gagging when I was doing that job. But you know, these people stayed with us for a couple of years, and after a few months, they became part of our family. We loved them, and they treated us like grandchildren. One time, a German soldier, I'll tell you about the raids in a minute, but one time a German soldier came to the butcher shop, and my dad was working in the store. Now, they didn't happen too often because there was a shortage of meat. The Germans took everything that they could. But this one time there was a meat in the butcher shop, and this German soldier came. He was all by himself. He started to speak German to my dad. And my dad knew enough German that he was able to understand him. He was just a young guy, and he had a very sad look on his face. While they were having the conversation, my dad soon realized that this guy was a Christian. And he spoke about God. And so did my dad. My dad did something which was a norm nowadays. But he invited this young German soldier into our house, into the living room. And they prayed together. They went on their knees and they prayed together. My dad in the Dutch language, the soldier in the German language. We often had raids in the room where the Jews lived, the room above the butcher shop, was like a bed sitting room. In the corner of the room was a hiding place. The hiding place had a hatch with a carpet on top, and on top of that, a table. Whenever there were raids, there were couriers, young women who worked with the underground. And somehow, often they would know by some kind of a contact that we would have a raid. These couriers knew the homes where the Jews were hidden. They would take their bikes and go to each home. They would open the door and they would shout, "Razzia! Razzia!" which would mean raids, raids. My mother would go quickly upstairs, and the Jews would go down and open the hatch and go down to the main level. It was a closet, and on the main level, the wall, the door going into the closet was covered with wallpaper, so it wasn't noticeable. Sometimes they would have to stay in there for several hours in very close quarters. But they survived, and this happened on several occasions. We also had people in our village who belonged to a political party called the NSB. They supported Hitler. They sided with Hitler. Some of them were informers, and one guy who lived down the street from us, his name was Ted, and he was the worst. Towards the end of the war, of course we didn't know the end yet, but he came to the store often to look for my dad, but he was usually not home. But he would interrogate my mother about John. Where is John? What is he up to? This made it very hard also for my mom. In 1943, another Jewish girl came to our house. Her name was Tony, and she was 22 years old. Tony didn't look Jewish, and so she didn't have to be hidden. She helped my mom with the chores, and especially helping out in the store, and helping with the housework, so she was a great help. Us kids just loved Tony because she kept us occupied. My mom had her nap in the afternoon, and we did games, she told wonderful stories. And a few weeks before we were liberated, I came home from school, and Tony and my mother were sitting in the living room on a piano bench. My parents were very musical people, and in one corner of the room we had piano, and the other corner an organ. When I came in the living room, our house was very quiet. And as they were sitting there, I said, "What are you doing?" "Well," she said, "do you see that German military truck out there?" I said, "Yes." "Well, the Germans have just picked up 3 of your dad's buddies. They're in that truck. They're next door right now, and they're just tearing the whole place apart. And they took a few bikes out and put them in the truck, but they're looking for more stuff." And my mother said, "Tony and I are praying that God will put an invisible hedge around our house so that the Germans will not come in our house. And that's what happened. They did not come in our house at that time. My parents did some wonderful things. And when it was time for liberation, nobody knew when that would happen, but we did know that the Canadians were coming closer. And then one day, when I came out of school, everybody was on the street. And I didn't know, everybody was excited, and I ran home. And I said to my mom, what is happening? She said, we are liberated, the Canadians are here. And she opened the door going up the staircase, and she shouted to the Jews, come on down, the Canadians are here. We are freed, you are alive, and you are alive. And she said, you have to come outside. So they went outside, and they sat on the front of our steps. And everybody was on the streets. And our neighbors saw these people sitting on our front step, and they said to my mother, who are these people? Well, she said, they are Jewish, and they have been living with us for the last 2 years. And they said, no, that's impossible. And how come we didn't know about that? Well, you weren't supposed to know about that. So, when the Canadian soldiers came, oh, what a party, what a party. That night, our band came out, and they played, and they marched down around our village. We sang for the first time in 5 years our national anthem. We sang the songs of our country, which we love, and hadn't been sang for the last 5 months. People were dancing. The red and white blue flags came out. And they danced around the village every evening behind our bands. We were so happy. We felt so free. The Canadian soldiers, they were great guys. We loved them. And usually they had quite a few kids behind them wherever they went. I was a bit shy, so one day though, my friend Anna said to me, you know, we have to go up to this Canadian soldier. I said, why? I don't know any English. Yeah, she said, all you have to say is, chocolate please. And we did. And yes, sir, the chocolate bars. Oh, it was just delicious. My mom and dad did wonderful things, but they did not want any praise or recognition. They were invited in the 80s to a Jewish conference in Washington, D.C. They were interviewed, and the Jewish people wanted to have their story in the archives. The third day, a Jewish lady came up to them, and she said, we want to present you with a gift. And my parents said, we don't want a gift. We don't want anything. Well, why not? Well, we really felt that God led us to do this work, to save a remnant of the Jewish nation. My parents were also awarded, along with another group of people who were highly Jews, and they were presented with the Righteous of the Nation Award. The Righteous of the Nation Award is only given, is the highest award that can be given to a Gentile. This same Jewish lady that had wanted to present my parents as a gift did come back to them, and she said, how about a gift to a trip to Israel? And then they said, we'd love to do that. It happened that my mom was up to it when the time came for them to go to Israel, so I went with my dad. And it was just a wonderful trip. I'd like to finish with a quote of my dad, taken from this book. It is about this war story. What I did differently from most others was that I chose to remain a man fighting a system and not individuals. He was a humble man, concerned about all humanity, German or Jew, friend or enemy. This has left an impression on me, and here I am telling you the story today, so that we will never forget, even in war, there can be love. I would like to read in Flanders Field. In Flanders fields, the poppies grow. Between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks still bravely sing. Scarce heard above the guns below. We are the dead. Sure, days ago we lived, fell dawn, saw sunset glow. Love, and we're not. And now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up your quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold on high. If you break faith with us who die, we shall not see, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. And a reply by John Mitchell. Oh, sleep in peace, where poppies grow. The torch your falling hand let go was caught by us, again held high, a beacon light in Flanders sky that dims the stars to those below. You are the dead, you held the foe, and here the poppy sees below. We prove our faith in you, who lie in Flanders fields. Oh, rest in peace. We quickly go to you who bravely died, and know in other fields was heard the cry for freedom's cause of you who lie so still asleep where poppies grow in Flanders fields. As in rumbling sound to and fro, the lightning flashes sky below, the mighty hosts appear, and high above the din of battle cry, scarce heard amidst the guns below. are fierce hearts who fight the foe and guard the place where poppies grow. Oh, sleep in peace, all you who lie in Flanders fields. And still the poppies gently blow between the crosses, row on row. The larks, still bravely soaring high, are singing now their lullaby to you, who sleep where poppies grow in Flanders fields. We will remember them. I also want to thank the veterans, your grand or great-grandfathers, your uncles or great-uncles. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here today